Michael Hann will be telling us about his passion for Van Halen in the feature with no name. All of this, plus a lo-fi pop live track from Dom. This is Music Weekly from The Guardian. Hello, you'll doubtless be delighted to know that I'm back. And it's not just me that's back, Rosie Swash is back too.
Hello.
Well, I've got bones to pick with you, actually.
Why?
Where were you last week?
Where was I last week? I just had some time off.
Well, before we go any further, very big thanks, obviously, to John Harris for standing in last week. Very eloquently presenting a special on Bob Dylan. If you haven't heard it, go back and download it after this week's programme. Anyway, also in the studio today is editor of Guardian Film and Music, Michael Hann. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Alexis. Hello, Rosie.
Hi.
Later on, you're going to be telling us about the little-known rock band Van Halen.
They may not be little known, but they are little valued, and I'm going to tell you why you should value them and love them.
You have
almost
described
as much as you do 14 Iced Bears.
Hey, don't diss the Bears. You have described Van Halen as the most important...
The most important white rock
Sorry,
band,
I paused
apart
because
from the Beatles.
I can scarcely believe what's written in front of me.
Apart from the Beatles, if you consider... we should come to this later, but if you consider bands that actually were popular, I think Van Halen have influenced more of them than anyone else apart from the Beatles.
Velvet Underground.
Yeah, there was 14 Iced Bears out of that, wasn't there?
I think you'll find the Velvet Underground quite influential. Anyway, don't tell us too much. We'll hear all about it later. The feature with no name, Michael Hann.
Yeah, well, a group very much like Kate Bush.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
the American Kate Bush.
That's right, they had long hair. Van Halen. Now, Alexis, Van Halen, I suspect I am the only person sitting at this table who loves Van Halen.
I like Van Halen.
Hey. I will say, it's kind of the last 6 months I've become really obsessed with Van Halen. As you know,
very much of the moment, I'm not surprised.
As you know, I have a 70s and 80s hard rock predilection. I grew up as a prepubescent headbanger. So Van Halen, a group I always had a sympathy for, but the last 6 months I've been listening to them an awful lot, and they are truly an astonishing group, Alexis. Now, you laughed at the beginning of the show about my assertion that they're the most influential white rock band apart from the Beatles. Now, you say the Velvet Underground, yeah, of course lots of groups influence them, but only 6 people ever listen to most of these groups. Van Halen influenced pretty well every American rock band that sold a shed load of records.
In what sense?
Over an enormous period between the late 70s right through to the arrival of Nirvana. Now, the problem for them, of course, is that virtually every single group they influenced was a disgrace in every way, shape, or form.
A disgrace to the name of Van Halen.
Well, a disgrace to the name of humanity. I mean, Poison, Motley Crue, Cinderella, Warren, all that rubbish. But Van Halen, I think the first Van Halen album especially, from late 1977, it's a real game-changing album. You know, I've seen it mentioned elsewhere, on a par with Are You Experienced or Nevermind the Bollocks. And I think actually that's perfectly appropriate. Van Halen genuinely reinvented hard rock. If you listen to the first Van Halen album now, and I asked you what year it was from, I reckon there's a fair chance you say 84, 85. It sounds years ahead of the game. It's a sound that didn't date for another 15 years, which is an incredible achievement.
In what
way
is it different from what? What did they do?
What had come before? You know what early 70s hard rock is like. Bluesy, sludgy, it trudges. Van Halen was all about lightness of touch, about speed, about attack, but about melody as well. I mean, of course, the best way to appreciate this is to actually hear some Van Halen.
Okay, well, let's hear something by them. Let's hear Dance the Night Away. Van Halen there with Dance the Night Away. That's from their debut, their eponymous debut album.
That's actually from their second album.
Okay.
Van Halen 2. Their second eponymous
Of course
album.
it's called Van Halen 2.
What year was that out?
And that's 78. I think that's late 78 or early 79. Now, I think what sets Van Halen apart is that unlike their influences only listened to Van Halen, but Van Halen were completely different. Eddie Van Halen taught himself to play by the kind of traditional rock thing of taking Cream's version of Crossroads and slowing it right down so he could learn every note. Invented what was completely his own style, but Dave Lee Roth, a genuinely interesting character.
Certainly is.
Well, he is in all sorts of ways. He came from a Jewish man who had family in the New York bohemian scene. His uncle ran the Café War in Greenwich Village.
Wow.
So yes, used to see all that bohemian stuff as a kid. And Eddie Van Halen talked about him in the first Van Halen interview from 1978, where he says, Dave, our singer, doesn't even own a stereo. He listens to the radio, which is a good variety. That's why we do have, if you like, on the record, Ice Cream Man, which is an old blues number, which is a change from the slam bang loud stuff. We're into melodies, melodic stuff. Most of our songs you can sing along with, even though it does have the peculiar guitar and end-of-the-world drums. And I think that's an interesting thing, the fact that Dave Lee Roth was not tied down to one single thing. And kind of the tension between him and Eddie Van Halen was what eventually kind of tore the group apart. Eddie Van Halen, wanted to be taken seriously as a musician. David Lee Roth was, to all intents and purposes, certainly in public,
like an entertainer,
a clown.
Yeah.
A showman. And but it resulted in some genuinely strange music as well at times. Their fifth album, is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, I think Diver Down, which is by most rational standards terrible. Most of it is covers, but they just sound so utterly unlike you expect. There's a version of Pretty Woman on there, the Roy Orbison song,
right?
Which when heavy metal bands do rock and roll covers, it's normally a rock and roll song speeded up. It doesn't tend to sound unworldly. And yet, they could still really, really rock. This is the thing people forget. I mean, a song like Unchained, which I believe we have ready to cue
We're
up.
about to hear, yeah.
A remarkable heavy rock song.
Van Halen with Unchained.
It's always a shame we have to fade out just as the chorus comes. I think it's a great chorus. But, though that's the way of the world. But David Lee Roth, now, as I was saying, a very interesting man. There's an interview with him by Lisa Robinson from 1984, which he goes through. He's really playing with her. He makes references to John Cassavetes and George Bernard Shaw. He clearly knows what he's talking about as well. He's not just, he's seen these names in newspapers somewhere. But he kind of pins down what Van Halen means to him. He says, I would still prefer to think of us as witless and tasteless. Arch enemy of the common public. That's all I wanted to be in life, really. I always wanted to be an outrage to public decency and a threat to women. And this is one of the few occupations where you're not only allowed that, but you're encouraged. And I think that quote almost completely sums it up. It's appalling, I want to be a threat to women. What a terrible thing to say. And yet at the same time, you're aware this is a role he's trying on. It's a really interesting dichotomy at the very heart of Van Halen, which makes me sound like a real ponce.
No, but clearly the subsequent bands that you're talking about,
they were just
a threat to women. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was much more to Van Halen. And another thing Roth says in that interview, which is talking about their influence, suggests that he's aware of the wider world as well. He says, I know for a fact that to a small degree we've bred a small legion of imitators, copycats, mimics, people who are using Van Halen for their prime and sole inspiration. But even more important than that are all the people who are just disgusted and revolted by our music and our presence and our appearance and the way I do interviews, and they've been forced to come up with some very substantial musical alternatives. And he's kind of right, isn't it? Because no heavy metal band or no hair metal band ever formed because they were fed up of hearing Bogshed or the Minutemen on the radio. But plenty of Bogsheds and Minutemens formed because I was sick of hearing the likes of Van Halen on the radio.
This is fascinating. Rosie, you said you're a fan of Van Halen.
I'm not a fan who knows a great deal, but I would say that all the things that Michael says about them are the things that I've always really enjoyed about them. There is a tastelessness there that is so in your face. I adore it. Is it Just Like Paradise or Living in Just Like Paradise?
Just Like Paradise.
The video for that is outrageous and has... Now, is that Dave Lee Roth era? Or is that Sammy Hagar? Did I want to get the wrong... I'm pretty sure it's Dave Lee Roth. Like doing these ludicrous kung fu kicks across the stage, and then it cuts to him abseiling down a cliff in what look, Nevada or something with a 200-foot drop, but at speed, like a little spider across the side of it. And then it cuts back to the set, and it's just like him just embracing life like some kind of maniac, and I really like the tune.
So if you watch any footage of Van Halen, even live footage, they do appear to be revolting individuals. It's all winks and points and nods and tongues coming out. They just look like the most revolting people. You really wouldn't want to spend an evening with them. But there's just such a huge but with them. They did something incredible. And the other thing is, actually, for all that Roth says, people hated us. Kind of a lot of American alternative people have always had a kind of secret love of Van Halen. Yeah, you don't find. I think one of the reasons they're not valued that much here is they didn't play here that often. Although on their first visit in 1978, they did come up with the single greatest on-stage announcement ever: Van Halen supporting Black Sabbath at the Lewisham Odeon. And Dave Lee Roth said, "Hey, Lewisham, the rock and roll capital of the universe!" Which I thoroughly admire. In fact, one of the first things I heard by Van Halen after I'd gone indie, after I'd renounced heavy metal, was on an SST compilation, the Blasting Concept, where they had the Minutemen covering Ain't Talking About Love. And they weren't doing it because they thought, here's a joke. They were doing it because it's just self-evidently a great song.
Is there a sort of cut-off point with Van Halen's material after which...
yes, and we know where that cut-off point is. It's when Diamond Dave leaves and Sammy Hagar comes
But the
in.
success continued.
They were more successful. They sold more records with Sammy Hagar. But artistically, the Sammy Hagar Van Halen is the Doug Yule Velvet Underground.
Wow. The two Van Halen songs that I know...
You're going to say, Why Can't This Be Love?
Why Can't This Be Love? Yeah.
Jump's ace. Jump's great.
Jump's great. Yeah,
Aztec Cameron did a brilliant version of Jump.
Well, there you go. This is fascinating. I mean, absolutely fascinating to hear a band like this contextualised in a slightly different way by you. We've got one more track by them. What are we going to hear?
We're going to hear the one that Minutemen covered, but we're going to hear it in the Van Halen original.
This is Ain't Talking About Love. Van Halen's Ain't Talking About the Love there, concluding the feature in that.
It's the best thing ever written about not caring about Arthur Lee.
Michael, thank you for doing that.
It's a
a genuinely eye-opening thing.